one voice. Let me express my concern about the vagaries of weather in recent years and its devastating effect on agriculture. You remember we talk about salinization of soil, we talk about shortage of rainfall, we talk about a lot of bad effects on the continent and on food security in different parts of this continent. The growing desertification of ground the Sahel, the movement of herders down south, and going along with increasing pressure on land, and its accompanying social and violent conflicts between farmers and herders, and the need of peaceful consistency. I think that our science and policy fraternity needs to run coherent action to foster the change we need. I have mentioned science because it holds the responsibility to generate knowledge, technology, and innovations as a solution to problems. Policies must drive down the change we need. It must be enforced to truly force down the change we need. I think that we need to embrace a bit more of an urgent spirit to birth the change we truly want. As we deliberate over these 3 days, let's come up with a clear assessment of the pace of technologies in climate-smart agriculture. Let us be very clear on what we want to put on the table as a continent in the upcoming COP27, in the direction we truly want our food system to trade. What do we want to do with our knowledge generation and management systems? What advances are we projecting for policy coherence and the emerging new partnerships of mutual benefit between Europe and Africa? Once again, welcome to Accra and wishes you a fruitful deliberation. Thank you for listening.
You can take your seat. Thank you so much, Dr. Aline Fowl, for those comments. I want to call a few people to take on their reserved seats here. I want to welcome Dr. Abebe Haile Gabriel. I also want to call Dr. Bruce Campbell. As Dr. Bruce comes, I also want to welcome, sorry, you can have, sit here, Dr. Olusu Afri Akoto, the Honorable Minister of Food and Agriculture. I also want to welcome the Honorable Minister of Agriculture, Liberia, Jeanette Millie-Cooper. To make sure that everybody sits just right next to that beautiful flags. So as we continue our program, I'm going to call Dr. Hans Hoogeveen to deliver her goodwill message, which is going to be virtual.
I'm more I hope you can hear me. At least on my screen, sure what's happening. Ladies and gentlemen, indeed, agriculture is the foundation for civilization and economic development, but moreover, it's the foundation for sustainability and the future of our earth. And indeed, partnerships, and especially partnerships based on solidarity, are the stepping stones for our future, and are also the stepping stones for the change we need. And I'm so proud of you and Africa, that Africa is leading the new way forward, and in leadership in getting there. And of course we know that sugary figures. I don't have to explain them at all, but we know already that we have 860 million people living in there due to wars, climate change, conflicts, and no access to food. And research of the World Bank has shown that 1% in increase in prices will lead to 10 million people extra in hunger. And especially also it shows that Africa is hit hardest. So if we don't act, we will, within 1 year, go over the 1 billion people living in hunger. And that is the biggest disaster which we cannot let happen. Let's not forget about the 3 billion people who don't have access to safe and affordable food. And at the same time, we are losing 1/3 of our produced food every year with a worth of $1 trillion US. And think about what we can do. When we speak about agriculture, when we speak about climate smart agriculture, what we can do with $3 trillion US in investments. And I think it's great that we have the scientists in the room. The scientists have shown us that we are not going to meet our climate change targets for 2030. So if one message is clear, we need transformative change. I'm optimistic because your conference is coming at the right moment, at the right time. Last week, there was the conference in Kigali for a new revolution in Africa for sustainable agriculture, a new food revolution. And indeed, we need such a revolution. But we don't need generic or broad approaches. We have to go now to the national level and to action. And we can do it. You have already shown that we can do it. Many of the countries in Africa, but also in other regions, are working on national pathways to transform the food system. Needed change. And those national pathways, I think climate and agriculture should get the highest priority. And let's not forget that our food systems and our pathways to the future are starting with our farmers. We have them to enable to produce in a more climate smart way. And it means also giving them science and the tools to do it. And that means, and that's one of the solutions and practical tools we have to find, how to give them access to affordable and implementable climate change science and practices. I hope that your conference will contribute to that, and I know you can, but do it in a practical way, not just advices or report, but let's think about doing actions to do so, and how to incorporate them in every national pathways of the governments in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. And if farmers are central, how are we then going to give them the support, the financial support needed to empower them to pay the price for their climate practices? And we are now working with the World Bank, FAO, some banks and some foundations on developing carbon credit system for farmers, where the farmers get a price if they implement climate smart practices and not without the private sector and partnerships with the private sector, we never achieve our goals and targets. And I know, because I'm also, besides co-chair of the Atlantic Climate Smart Agriculture, I'm also co-chair of the Champions Sovereign Team. And food losses, and certainly in your regions, in some part of your regions, 70%, that we make country profiles, where we stipulate the critical problems in the food system, and especially the food losses. And with that, the hotspots also saying we have to invest, for example, in cold storage or packaging or batteries. With that knowledge, we start working with governments and the private sector around the table to see how we can make an investment plan, for example, to bring the cold storage to the farmers or to bring the packaging to the farmers. And this is a complete way how we can solve the problems. The World Bank, together with regional banks, are willing to invest together with governments and the private sector, especially in loans, and also dealing with the first risk process. This is a practical tool which is now under development. We have started now in Nigeria, but we have last week made an agreement with 6 other African countries to start working their national pathways with this concrete tool to develop action investments within 1 or 2 years in those countries for food loss. And of course we can expand that to the food system. That's what was already discussed with AGRA, with Agnes Galvani, but also with your commissioner, which I very much appreciate, and our strong work on food losses. I think this is how we have to do it. From knowing goals, knowing solutions, going to the action, going to the farm level, and make it happen. So we have to embrace the spirit of your governments, the spirit in Africa for change, but also embrace the spirit in ourselves for change. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hans, for the remarks. I want to call upon Dr. Bebe Haile Gabriel to deliver his goodwill message.
Thank you, MC. Honorable Ministers, Chair of FARA Board, Ambassador Dr. Idi FARA, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I stand on existing protocol. It's my pleasure to join you at the Science and Partnership for African Agriculture Conference 2022. As we look to supporting countries to achieve Agenda 2030, new evidence continues to signal a rise in world hunger, reversing years of progress. The impacts are pronounced in Africa, where up to 278 million people went hungry in 2021, which means 1 out of every 5 persons. Africa recorded an increase of about 46 million people in 2 years, between 2019 and 2021, in the number of hungry people, which shows the devastating impact that the COVID-19 pandemic has had on Africa. Climate change and variability, alongside conflict and economic slowdowns exacerbated by COVID-19 and the Russia-Ukraine war, are the major drivers behind the recent rise in hunger and are the leading causes of severe food crisis. Climate variability and extreme intensify the frequency and impacts of the multiple and overlapping shocks on agriculture and food systems, which in turn disproportionately affects the poorest and the most vulnerable communities, most of whom depend on agriculture for their livelihoods. Such communities typically respond to protracted climate shocks by undertaking desperate coping strategies, such as selling off any assets, in turn perpetuating the cycle of poverty and vulnerability with long-term negative impacts on food security, nutrition, and human capital. We have just 8 years before the 2030 deadline, or just 8 annual harvests. There is a renewed imperative and sense of urgency for efficient, inclusive, resilient, and sustainable transformation of agri-food systems to drive the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals, the regional commitments such as the 2014 Malabo Declaration and other global compacts such as the Paris Agreement. Bold and rapid measures are needed to shift the African continent to a trajectory that is compatible with a climate resilient and sustainable future. FAO's strategic framework that will guide our work in the next 10 years aims to support member states in their efforts to deal with climate change adaptation and mitigation in agri-food systems. The framework is encapsulated in FAO's 4 aspirations or 4 betters, namely better production, better nutrition, a better environment, and a better life, leaving no one behind. In this respect, 2 new FAO strategies are particularly relevant for the deliberations on climate-smart agriculture during this week. The first is the strategy on climate change, which guides FAO climate action at global, regional, country, and local level. The second is the science and innovation strategy that aims to strengthen the use of science and innovation in FAO's technical interventions and normative guidance, including on climate action. FAO collaborates with its partners to ensure that regional perspectives are strengthened in the strategies, initiatives, programmatic interventions, and policy dialogue at all levels. FAO also focuses on strengthening its role in the science policy interface, fostering partnerships with scientific and research organizations and networks at all levels, and deepening collaboration with other United Nations agencies, development finance institutions, and other stakeholders on scientific issues. A good example in this respect is the recent collaboration of the FAO Regional Office for Africa with the African Union Commission and FARA to organize regional consultations that brought together regional and country partners to deliberate on FAO's strategies on climate change and on science and innovation. The active engagement of African partners in these dialogues was critical to ensure that regional and country perspective guided the formulation of FAO's strategic choices and were effectively addressed in priority actions for implementation. Several of the issues that will be discussed during this week are well aligned with FAO's 4 regional priorities for Africa. In particular, FAO's regional priority theme on climate action and sustainable natural resource management aims, among others, to foster sustainable transformation in agri-food systems through promoting climate-smart agriculture, ecosystem restoration, and sustainable land biodiversity and water management. FAO also supports the efforts of its members and partners on climate action through programmatic and policy support, as well as advocacy and communication. This includes, for example, support to countries on climate action and achievement of their nationally determined contribution, the NDCs, including mobilization of climate finance and formulation of NDC implementation plans and tracking their progress. Also strengthening the capacity of governments and key national stakeholders through development of policy tools adapted for regional, country, or local contexts, such as the climate smart agriculture country profiles and regional synthesis, which highlights priorities for climate action in the agriculture sectors and the development and dissemination of tools and interventions for climate resilient agriculture and food systems, which include risk monitoring and early warning systems, such as the early warning, early action, and forecast-based financing, vulnerability reduction and climate adaptation measures at farm, ecosystem, and landscape levels, such as climate resilient and climate smart agricultural good practices, nature-based solutions, and large-scale restoration, such as through the African Great Green Wall for the Sahara and the Sahel, and risk sensitive
to ensure safe lives and the planet. It is in this light that the Science and Partnership for African Agriculture Conference is most welcome. It provides a platform for high-level individuals in Africa and Europe to jointly share knowledge and experiences geared towards addressing the pertinent issues affecting the continent's agriculture and food security. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the need to identify solutions to challenges currently facing the food and agriculture sector and build strong partnerships to accelerate actions in addressing them cannot be overemphasized. The central theme of the conference, introspection on climate smart agriculture, action to strengthen accountability, resource use and impact in Africa, unquote, is apt. We need that deep reflection on the issues at stake to help us chart a new chapter that is more promising. Ladies and gentlemen, the effects of climate change on the agricultural ecosystem are very evident. The data shows increasing temperatures and sea levels, changing precipitation patterns, and the possibility of more extreme weather that will threaten human health, safety, food security, and socio-economic development in Africa. Prediction up to 2024 show the possibility of continued warming and decreasing rainfall, especially over the North and Southern Africa, and increased rainfall over the Sahel. These changes are going to affect food systems. We will take only science and policy action to enable the world to respond adequately. How can our collective action hold the rising temperature within the 1.5 degrees Celsius to avoid looming catastrophe? Agriculture is reported to be contributing about 20% of greenhouse gas emission, being second highest contributor to climate change. On the other hand, agriculture takes the greatest toll of the effect of climate change. Managing the trade-offs to enhance the development of resilient food systems for our common goal is imperative. In Africa, for example, how do we manage the trade-off between increasing livestock production to increase nutrition security, whilst being mindful of the high greenhouse emissions that come from raising livestock? How do we manage trade-offs involving the use of inorganic fertilizers when our soil's productivity is low and will not yield much without the use of inorganic fertilizers? This is not beyond science. The global community of science must work hard to find solutions to these predicaments. The introspection in this conference should tell us the progress we are making in the fight against climate change, the gaps, and what needs to be scaled up. Fighting climate change involves two key pillars: adaptation and mitigation. The scientists will need to come up with new technologies and knowledge that will help us produce food and fiber in a sustainable way that aligns with the new climate realities. We'll need new farming systems and techniques that will help us produce more with less external input. We also will need to develop new varieties and new livestock breeds that are tolerant to adverse weather conditions and are able to withstand the vagaries of climate change. While research will do its bit, we all have a role to play by changing our living culture and practices. Our ability to think green and maintain green actions in all our activities will go a long way to combating climate and achieving sustainable food systems. Ghana has a climate-smart agriculture plan developed in response to the National Climate Change Policy. The plan is implemented in collaboration with the Ministry of Environment, Science, Technology and Innovation, MISTI, and the Environmental Protection Agency. We also have many development partners funded initiatives on climate-smart agriculture going on. Improved coordination of these efforts will be important in maximizing resource use and to obtain optimum results. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, since 2017, the Ministry of Food and Agriculture in Ghana has been implementing planting for food and jobs as a key component of the government's vision for promoting agriculture-driven economic growth. Subsequent programs, including the Worrying for Food and Jobs and Planting for Export and Rural Development, as well as the Horticulture and Mechanization modules, were introduced in 2019 to underpin the modernization of the sector in Ghana. These programs have successfully tackled several of the root problems of Ghana's agricultural value chain, targeting the low productivity arising from limited use of improved seeds, improved inputs such as fertilizers, insecticides, and seed varieties. By providing a 50% subsidy on the cost of this input, financed solely by the taxpayer of Ghana, and that of complementary services, including extension services and marketing outputs, the Planting for Food and Jobs program has achieved major agricultural advances in Ghana. Comparing yield levels of maize, rice, and soya with those before the start of the PFJ program in 2016 demonstrates striking results. Maize production increased from 1.72 million metric tons to 1.72 million metric tons to 3.58 million metric tons, representing an increase of over 100%. The rise from 687,000 to over 1 million metric tons, that's over 56%. Soya from 143,000 to 221,000, representing an increase of 55%. Over the same period, yields increased by 38%, 13%, and 4% for maize, rice, and soya. It is however important to state that these yields are still 40% below the estimated potential, and more has to be done to continue increasing the yields of smallholder farmers in particular. The increases in production were instrumental in mitigating the impact of the pandemic in 2021, and they also alleviate the effects of the global food crisis triggered by the Ukraine crisis. If I may explain further, in 2017, the rate of growth in the agricultural sector in this economy was 4.8%. By 2020, in the eye of the COVID, the rate had gone to 7.4%, and last year, 2021, the rate of growth of Research and innovation is about collaborations, sharing knowledge and practices. That's why we built a long and successful history of cooperation between the European Union and African Union scientists. The Pan-African Network for Economic Analysis of Policies is a vehicle for such cooperation to support policymakers developing sustainable food systems. Socioeconomic modeling is particularly important in addressing the challenges of transforming food systems, securing food and nutrition, and mitigating the wide-ranging implications of today's global crisis. These models deal with the local condition of each African country and region while accounting for global changes. Furthermore, these models allow us to bring together environmental and climate data too, providing powerful guidance to us in the African Union and European Union on coherence, trade-offs and synergies between our different policies. I'm happy that we can continue to work hand in hand to make sure that through science collaborations we can help protecting our planet and its resources and offer better conditions to our population. I wish you a very successful events. Thank you.
Thank you, Massimo. Let me call upon Dr. Simplex Mwala to join this gentleman here. We're going to take a look at a video message by Stefan Quest, the DG of the Joint Research Center for the European Union Commission.
Research Centre, the Commission's Science and Knowledge Service. Our mission at the JRC is to carry out scientific research in order to provide independent scientific data, evidence and advice to support the European Union's policy right across the entire decision-making process. As you may know, the European Commission, including the JRC, puts a high priority on climate neutrality in terms of adaptation and mitigation, on sustainable agriculture and food systems, and on global food security. All these topics benefit from strong international partnership, and that's why we're here today. The list of challenges we face is long. The increased frequency of extreme weather events, food insecurity, spikes in the prices of energy and fertilizers, the COVID-19 pandemic, demographic growth, biodiversity loss, and even armed conflicts. They are all complex and truly test the resilience of our societies. Equally, to find possible solutions requires complex analyses within a socio-economic, political, environmental landscape, and that's why it's essential to support policymakers with sound scientific evidence in Europe and beyond. Our beautiful continents, Africa and Europe, cannot operate alone in tackling the challenges we face today. To define effective and timely policy interventions, we need to join forces to develop the necessary data, analyses and assessment tools with a global perspective. Scientific collaboration and partnership as well as synergistic data and knowledge sharing, will certainly be elements of success. In the food system domain, we see that cooperation is particularly valuable to help develop local production and markets, to identify and promote climate-neutral, sustainable farming systems, to enhance the use of local species, the protection of soil fertility and biodiversity, and to monitor cropping conditions and the composition of stock, markets, and trade developments. All this considering the societal impacts and the effects on the Sustainable Development Goals. Within the JRC's collaborative framework, I would particularly mention the Pan-African Network of Analyses of Policy, PANAP, an initiative that was endorsed by the Agriculture Ministerial Conference of the African Union European Union Alliance in 2019 and again in 2021. PANAP is a great example of a centre of excellence that can aggregate consolidated knowledge on economic policy analysis in the agricultural sector and stimulate synergies within Africa and between our two continents. So today, the presence of PANAP as part of this important conference demonstrates the level of commitment of both the African Union Commission and the European Commission, and the level of recognition of the quality of its activities. Although the network is still relatively young, I firmly believe that this conference will stimulate its growth and encourage the participation of other African and European research institutions to help spread the knowledge-based economy and society approach. We cannot overstress the importance of sustainable food systems today, and this conference is an important opportunity for the exchange of ideas and knowledge. I extend warm wishes for a successful and fruitful event and address my personal thanks to the organisers for their great efforts in making it happen.
Thank you so much, Dr. Stefan. I think the minister talked about what is essentially very important, the work that the government of Ghana has been trying to do to advance agriculture. And you've seen the likes of Dr. Abebe talking about that more than 270 million people who are now going to bed hungry. What he did not talk about is actually that these people are going to bed not just hungry, but also angry. They're angry at leaders who are not able to deliver to them. And some of our leaders have been saying, oh, you know what, we don't have resources to invest in everything. But the resources are there. When you go to Silicon Valley, the resources are there. When you go to the European Union, the resources are there. But actually leveraging those resources requires things like partnerships, which Dr. Stefan have just talked about. And so I want to call again Massimo Mina, the head of cooperation at the European Union Commission, to talk about that partnership.
Good morning again, and thank you. This time I'm going to speak on behalf of the Ambassador of the European Union to Ghana, Mr. Richard Razali, who cannot be with us today. Excellencies, distinguished guests, dear participants, all protocols duly observed. I would like to start by congratulating the organizer of the 4 parallel conferences and acknowledge the work undertaken by FIRE, the Forum for African Research in Agriculture, and many institutions represented here today that are long-standing partners for the European Union. It is a pleasure to see all of you gathered in Accra on this special occasion. There is no doubt that a profound transformation of agriculture and food system is needed to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. This is even more true with the food crisis that we're facing right now. The food crisis does not come alone, but with dramatic social consequences. We also observe the increasing impacts of climate change, loss of biodiversity, and the degradation of ecosystems and natural resources. Agricultural research and innovation are key driving forces of such transformation. It is important to tailor them to local conditions at farm level and to foster smallholders, farmers, and communities' active participation in the value chain. As innovation is particularly fed by science and research, we believe that science effort and development assistance can gain much more impact if they are more closely connected. Good policies should be fed by good science. That's why it's also essential that scientists provide policymakers with sound scientific evidences. They should use cutting-edge methodologies for policy impact analysis. The EU is committed to support research and innovation for the transformation towards sustainable food systems in Africa. We build on our new policy framework, the EU Green Deal, and in particular the Farm to Fork strategy. This includes agroecology, circular economy, resilience to climate change. It builds on science and mobilizes public and private investments. The EU-Africa high-level policy dialogue on food and nutrition security and sustainable agriculture is just another example of the commitment of Africa and the European Union in this area. This dialogue benefits from financial resources from both continents. Its roadmap aligns to the African Union Science, Technology and Information Strategy for Africa 2024 and to the Science Agenda for Agriculture in Africa. The involvement of all stakeholders in such partnerships is also key. If research and science are to produce impact, they need to be at the service of the beneficiaries, not only as final recipients, but also as users leading processes. Here, I think to smallholder farmers, to transformation units, local and national authorities, and private sector operators, all along the value chains. FARA and European partners have produced over the years very interesting results, which now lead to further reflections and actions. All this translates into making agriculture, food and nutrition security and innovation important components of our cooperation agenda with Africa. The EU support to agriculture, food, nutrition and security in Africa is closely aligned to the comprehensive Africa Agriculture Development Programme and to the Malabo Declaration of 2014. It focuses on 4 strategic axes. First, promoting nutrition-sensitive agriculture. The EU ambitious commitment is to fight undernutrition and reduce stunting for 7 million children by 2025. Second, strengthening the resilience to food crisis in order to support the most vulnerable population to withstand, adapt, and quickly recover from stresses and shocks. Third, promoting the transformation towards sustainable food systems and help farmers coping with climate change and degradation of natural resources. Agroecology is a promising avenue in this regard. I would like to remind that the European Union will allocate 35% of its partnership and cooperation budget to climate-relevant action. And this is of particular importance for agriculture in Africa, already severely impacted by climate change. Fourth, food system and agriculture as engines of growth and jobs, leaving no one behind. This implies leveraging funding to sustainable agriculture value chain with a particular focus on smallholders and SMEs. The EU also demonstrated its commitment with African small farmers through its support to a sustainable cocoa initiative, which aims at improving cocoa farmers' livelihood with a decent living income, while promoting agricultural transformation and sustainability in the cocoa supply chain. In Africa, we are providing support to 5 African continental and sub-regional organizations for agricultural research and advisory services. FARA, the Forum for African Research in Agriculture, AFAAS, the African Forum for Agricultural Advisory Services, and the 3 sub-regional organizations, CORAF, Azareka, and Cardesa. This conference highlights our support and the diversity of our interventions. The Climate Smart Agriculture Conference will highlight progress on this front, and from our side, we will demonstrate the contribution of agroecology to climate smart agriculture. We also support FARA to draw lessons from COP17 to COP27 on policies to address climate change and to elaborate a 10-year plan for climate-smart agriculture to be discussed at the COP27. This will be an important outcome. As part of the AU-EU high-level policy on science, technology and innovation, we formed the LEAP4 project. The launch of the Africa-Europe International Research Consortium platform on Friday will be the main outcome of this project. We also support the institutional capacities of FARA and of a sub-regional organization, which I just mentioned, to address climate change. We note very positively the efforts of this organization to work together. Last but not least, the Pan-African Network for Economic Analysis of Policy, co-hosted by FARA and the African Union Commission, works in strong partnership with the EU Joint Research Center. So thank you to the General Assembly of PANAP and to the Joint Research Center. I'm confident that this week set of conferences will deliver productive and ambitious outcomes, and I wish you all full success in your work. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Massimo. I know some of you are already asking, all these speeches by the European Union, is this just about the European Union? No, there's more coming. We have our own African Union Commission, and allow me to welcome Dr. Simplice Nwala, who's the head of agriculture at the African Union Commission. Welcome.
Excellences, Mesdames, Messieurs, on est encore le matin, bonjour. Je voudrais vous lire le message de Son Excellence ambassadeur Chef Sarko, commissaire à l'agriculture, au développement rural, économie bleue et environnement durable de la Commission de l'Union africaine. Avec votre permission, je devrais lire ce message tel qu'elle a préparé. Your Excellency, I want to stand on the existing protocol. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to this conference that is organized at a time when the continent, or rather the food systems on the continent, has been challenged by climate change and the other shocks, mainly the COVID-19 and the Russia-Ukraine war. The importance of science and partnership conference for agriculture is fitting well with this context. The year 2022 has been declared the year of food security and nutrition on the continent, with the need to strengthen the resilience of our food systems. The theme of this conference, introspection on climate-smart agricultural action to strengthen accountability, resource use and impact, is very timely, as we are all challenged with the scourge of climate change and its multidimensional negative effects on our life and livelihood. The absolute rise in temperature and excessive rainfall leading to floods suggests the need to look back at what we have done in the past. How has it contributed to where we are, and what we need to do to move forward in our craving to have the type of Africa we need. The Agenda 2063 of the African Union, the Africa we want, and its flagship program, the Comprehensive African Agricultural Development Program, that is a well-crafted framework for achieving the type of agricultural transformation we need on the continent to achieve the Africa we want, has spelled out the various actions that should be taken. And I encourage every stakeholder to look at the agenda and to ensure our actions are fitted within this continental frameworks. Your Excellency, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I reckon that this conference brings four fundamental pillars of our progress towards together as an independent conference. The science, policy, knowledge management, and partnership, expressed as the biannual Climate Smart Agriculture Stakeholder Conference, the Pan-African Network for Economic Analysis of Policies meeting, the Knowledge Management for Agricultural Development Conference, and the LEAP for FNSA closing workshop, and the launch of the International Research Consortium. The contributions of various partners, and the European Union in particular, in supporting the agricultural development on the continent is to acknowledge. I am aware the various projects that I've just listed are funded by the European Union through instruments like the Horizon 2020, the Desiria portfolios, and others. I want to highlight the importance of the EU partnership that is implemented through the high-level policy dialogue and its research and innovation partnership on food and nutrition, security, and sustainable agriculture. The attention given to the issue of climate change in this partnership is very useful, especially its contribution in advancing the cause of science, technology, generation, and solutions. FARA and its partners, as well as country partners, need to continue to put their effort into generating new technology that are climate smart. Without appropriate science leading to new technology and knowledge, our efforts around adaptation and mitigation of climate change may end up as stuck. I celebrate our scientists. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I would like to speak to knowledge management component of our work. We have realized that this has constituted a major gap in our development trajectory. Our dysfunctional management or lack of appreciation of knowledge management over the time has kept us back. We have had a situation where a lot of knowledge and technology are generated but are not appropriately disseminated and as such did not bring the benefit to the end users. The Knowledge Management Initiative of FARA under the CADEP XP4 action is helping, and I think we need to top up the game to ensure that knowledge is packaged, archived, disseminated, and utilized properly. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, let me speak to policy component, which is a major driver, and we cannot overemphasize its importance. All the effort of scientists, knowledge managers, development actors, and all others will still need a coherent policy instrument to move forward. As such, policy coherence should be boosted. I therefore want to say that the effort of the panel in this conference is important. It's an important panel standing for the Pan-African policy networks. This was an initiative which has benefited from a series of intercontinental partnerships for knowledge and technology exchange, capacity building, joint programming. The South-South, North-South, and trilateral partnership are very good examples. Europe-African partnership is a great example and laying the path on how things should be done. The closure of the LEAF for FNSA closing conference and the launch of the International Research Consortium platform is an exciting development. I understand the LEAP for FNSA has run its activity supported by the European Union Commission under the Horizon 2020 in the last 4 years, and this component is coming to an end. but this is not an end of the network, but a refining to address other issues that will lead to progress. I want to thank again the European Union and the African partners that are co-developing the International Research Consortium platform. As you meet over these 3 days, I want to encourage the actors in this meeting to come up with practical ways to ensure that the International Research Consortium finds its footing and can take up the good work that we have all contributed to in the past. Let me close on the Thanksgiving note to all the organizers of this conference, especially Farah, Koraf Azerika Kadesa, AFAS, and the Development Partners Organization, AFIL, GACSA, and that has contributed to the organization of this conference and for their good effort. With this, I want to thank you for your attention and wish all of you fruitful deliberations. I thank you.
Allow me to give another round of applause to Dr. Simplis. I know some of you are already tired that the speeches are very many, but I want to tell you that we're coming to the conclusion of this morning session. We're going to follow a speech by Dr. Akin Adeshina, the President of the African Development Bank, and it's going to be delivered by Dr. Beth Dunford, the Vice President for Agriculture, Human and Social Development at FDB.
So it's my pleasure to represent African Development Bank President Akinwumi Adesina in addressing you here today. And it's really with regret that I'm unable to join you in person for the Science and Partnerships for Agricultural Conference, which in actuality is 4 significant meetings merged into one event. So this conference and really the moments leading to COP27 are pivotal for Africa. The African continent is the world's most vulnerable to climate change impacts. Africa contributes the least to global warming and has the lowest emissions, yet the continent faces exponential collateral climate change related damage. And this damage poses risks to its economies, water and food systems, public health, and significantly agriculture. Climate change threatens to undo Africa's project in developing its agricultural value chains. And these are value chains that have the power to lift more Africans into prosperity. We know that there are solutions to mitigate climate change impacts on agriculture, as well as help millions of African farmers adapt and thrive in agribusiness. The state of climate smart agriculture in Africa is really on the rise. And I would actually say, I would go so far as to say that the world could take a page from Africa's mix of boosting food production and job creation, climate smart, tech-savvy, gender-sensitive investments in agriculture. So one of these investments is our flagship, Technologies for African Agricultural Transformation. So we like to call it TAT. TAT is delivering proven, climate-smart agri-tech like drought-tolerant maize, heat-tolerant wheat, and low-carbon emission protein production of aquaculture across the continent. So the Technologies for African Agricultural program aims to help the continent fulfill its enormous potential in this sector by employing high-impact, climate-smart technologies to boost output. So Africa is home to 60% of the world's arable land, yet the continent's citizens remain importers of food. Millions of Africans are productive in the sector, yet the region remains one of the most food insecure in the world. The bank has embarked on a mission to address these challenges holistically through the TAT program. So launched in 2018, TAT is an integral part of the bank's Feed Africa strategy and has galvanized the investment of more than $800 million in agricultural value chain projects in 21 African countries. TAT operations in Sudan and Ethiopia, for example, are scaling up wheat production to record-breaking levels. In Ethiopia, TAT helps seed companies to produce and distribute enough heat-tolerant, certified wheat varieties and helped farmers to expand production across more areas last season, allowing Ethiopia to grow enough of the grain and eliminate wheat imports for the first time in modern history. Ethiopia says its embrace of TAT should see Ethiopia export wheat in 2023. So in July, the bank's board of directors approved nearly $30 million in new financing for the TAT program, which overall aims to increase Africa's food output by 100 million tons and lift 40 million people out of poverty by 2025. So TAT will have a central role in the bank's $1.5 billion African Emergency Food Production Facility. This facility is a bold, unprecedented, and comprehensive initiative to support smallholder farmers to fill a food system shortfall of at least 30 million metric tons of food due to Russia's war in Ukraine. The African Emergency Food Production Facility will provide 20 million smallholder farmers with climate-smart certified seeds, and it will increase access to agricultural fertilizers and enable them to rapidly produce 38 million metric tons of food. And this is a $12 billion increase in food production scheduled for just 2 years. So to date, the bank group's board of directors has approved a total of $1.13 billion in mixed financing for the emergency facility programs targeting 24 countries. More country approvals are expected in the coming weeks. And we know that climate adaptation and productivity are at the core of Africa's food systems transformation challenge. So through TAT and the bank's new food production facility, we can peel away the label attached to the continent as having the world's lowest yield per hectare in terms of productivity. And these programs at scale can help propel Africa toward being known as a continental, climate-smart agricultural breadbasket, able to feed itself and feed the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It is great that Dr. Beth talked about gender sensitivity in agriculture, because our next guest is the only woman minister in this room. If you're smart enough, you can already tell. And this person has worked for the UN for more than 13 years. He has taken on very important tasks in Africa and across the world. She has also founded an organization called FABRA Liberia, which currently is Liberia's largest rice processor and producer. And she has also laid out the vision for Liberia's transformation of agriculture. Ladies and gentlemen, join me to welcome Her Excellency Honorable Janine Millie Cooper, Minister of Agriculture, Liberia.
How will I place this so that I can read? Dr. Fall, Dr. Abebe, Dr. Simplice, Dr. Campbell, Yemi, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, permit me to stand on existing protocols. It's a decided honor for the Republic of Liberia, through me, to be asked to speak to you, along with such an illustrious panoply of expertise, scientific acumen, and global leadership. I convey warmest greetings from His Excellency President George Manawia to the government and people of our sisterly Republic of Ghana and organizers of this SPAC 2022 for the excellent hospitality being accorded us. Returning to Accra was for me quite nostalgic. Yesterday I was sitting in the VIP lounge at Kotoka Airport, and I couldn't help but reflect on my last time here when I was part of the United Nations mission for Ebola emergency relief in 2014. Ghana's actions in hosting and facilitating such a life-saving mission during a period of devastation in our affected countries can't be appreciated enough. But in thinking back to those days and times, I'm reminded of the myriad challenges faced by my country, Liberia, only a few years emerging from a terrible civil war, faced with a deadly pandemic which pounded our agricultural sector. Hundreds of our farmers died, and thousands of our farming families are still impacted even today by that shock. A few years later, I put aside my UN career and rejoined my compatriots to work on building up a commercial rice sector and, by extension, agricultural sector in Liberia from the private perspective. And if there's a value chain that epitomizes the challenges of doing agricultural business in Africa, it will be the rice value chain in Liberia, where rice is our staple food. We're the highest consumer of rice per capita on the continent, and we don't produce it enough to feed ourselves. Working from seed to plate, that's to say, acquiring seeds, invited by His Excellency, and I can tell you, I first said, no, let me be here, I will advise. He asked me to do for Liberia what you've done with your company. A challenge of transformation, if ever there was one. And that wasn't all. A brief 3 weeks after he commissioned me, my country, like most of the world, went into COVID lockdowns. And so I hadn't even met all of the staff in the ministry or even gotten to know the sector, the broader agricultural sector. And there we were, face to face once more with the sheer vulnerability of our food systems, because we depend so heavily on the outside world to feed ourselves. We were worried about disruptions in our food import supply chains, and for some of us, we were constrained by being unable to export our produce as country after country was locking down their ports. Liberia agriculture is no different from many African countries. Production is heaviest at subsistence level, and 70 to 80% of our rural populations are engaged in agriculture or agricultural livelihoods. 40% of our national GDP derives from agriculture. But we are challenged with low yields, production systems that don't follow our demographic patterns, where we have youth who are the majority of our population are less and less involved in agriculture. Our women, who are the backbone of our agriculture, are disempowered. Our extension advisory services are negligible, with one public extension officer per 35,000 people. In this context, what I call E3C, Ebola, climate, COVID conflict, with the constellation of challenges and limitations in a funding arena that's increasingly restrictive as our national burden of external debt mounts from our efforts to overcome previous challenges, I wondered, how do you transform a sector? And you know, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure it happens here too, but in Liberia, every day you hear, see Ghana. Ghana is doing this, and my fellow minister has just expounded how they have grown agriculture in 5 years from 3.4% to 8.4%. Look at Sierra Leone. Sierra Leone, Ghana. See Nigeria, how they are producing rice. Underlying this is, why can't Liberia be like that? The simple answer is that Liberia can. And we're willing to roll up our sleeves and make it happen, first by taking stock not just of our challenges, which can overwhelm you, but also of our assets and benefits that we have going for us, and start from there. Many of the projects in the portfolio that I inherited as Minister of Agriculture were designed to overcome the challenges that we face. But a projectized approach to development is like drinking soup with a fork. So much time and energy and money is spent on defining problems, redefining problems, admiring the problems, studying them, researching them, coming up with the same findings. This is a problem. And then you design solutions that are rarely comprehensive and usually limited in geography, scope, timing, and impact. Many of our development partners know what I'm talking about. We will select 6 counties out of our 15 and say we're going to do this here. The other ones are left behind. We're going to say we're only going to focus on cocoa value chain. The other ones are left behind. You can't really impact development in that way. So the government of President Weah ignited the current transformation of our agricultural sector through several positive interventions which are starting to yield results. The first was defining the broad policy areas that needed attention and committing ourselves to an intentional focus on our agricultural priorities. A focus on agribusiness and commercialization models was one part of the solution. Looking at enabling factors such as access to finance, low rates of cultivation, low yields, high post-harvest losses, and limited markets, we had to consider all of those. At the same time, we were heavily involved in 2 very important processes of COVID-riddled 2021. The Global Food Systems Summit, held in September, and the COP26, held in November. Both of these events highlighted the importance of holistic approaches, of working on multiple fronts at the same time, of deliberately designing interventions to consider not only improving agricultural productivity in 1 crop or 2, but to do so in a climate-smart way and simultaneously focusing on the environment, food security, nutritional sufficiency, and meeting the SDGs. Whew. Transformation of agriculture is not just about agriculture. So we took a look at what we have going for us in the agriculture sector, looking for those enablers and catalysts for our agricultural transformation. We're working on building our agri-food systems using climate-smart agriculture to sustainably increase productivity and food security. And so here is Liberia, home to more than half of, or almost half, of the remaining intact tracts of the Upper Guinea Forest, the 3rd chamber of the lungs of the world. It's West Africa's most important carbon sink. That one I can say with pride. We got that one. And it's West Africa's most important biodiversity hotspot. Here is Liberia, whose natural capital valuations are more than $35 billion. And with a carbon sequestration rate of more than 16 billion tons every year. Every year. And our greenhouse gas emissions are so low that our entire country's emissions are less than some countries' per capita emissions. Here is Liberia with all of this wealth, struggling to feed itself. Here is our climate portfolio is among the best in the world, but we won't meet any of the SDGs. So my initial thoughts about climate smart agriculture was a skeptical questioning. Smart for who? Smart why and how? Because the heavy pollution, as we have heard, caused by global agribusinesses is not our experience. That's not us. Or even in most parts, not us in Liberia, even most parts of sub-Saharan Africa. When I see some of the climate smart solutions like regenerative agriculture in Western countries, regenerative agriculture, it looks just like my farm. And other farms in Liberia. It's another way to say shifting cultivation, which is what we do. When I hear the European Commissioner say that the EU wants to increase the number of family farms from 7% to 25% of their farming, that's great. For us, the Liberian equivalent of family farms is what we call smallholders. That's the majority. We're past 25%. We're at 70 to 80%. I don't think we're talking about the same thing. So if commercial agriculture and big farming have grown using chemicals and fertilizers that harm the planet and its people, and we in Liberia and many of us in Africa have avoided the use of these same chemicals and fertilizers. We barely mechanize our farming, and we have so few manufacturing plants. How much do we need to change the way we do agriculture in order to be climate smart? So for us in Liberia, we are determined our transformation of our agricultural sector need not undermine our traditional systems. It should enhance them. Mechanization at smallholder level using systems of aggregation of outputs for markets and sharing of inputs such as tractors and plows, and simultaneously addressing our problems of youth unemployment and women disempowerment, that seems to me like it's climate smart for us. We look at our serious lack of mechanization. That's probably the greatest impediment to greater yields and farm output. We need machines suited to our farm sizes and our rolling topography in Liberia. And these machines and machinery would almost be exclusively operated by youth. You don't see old folks there. Young men, mainly. Getting terrain-appropriate mechanization will attract more people to our farms, raising their incomes and raising also our food production. Win-win. Using machinery and digitalized solutions, another youth magnet, will almost immediately impact the amounts and quality of food that we produce. That's climate smart for us. I'm also amazed at how little innovation we actually apply to finding solutions to improve the lot of women in agriculture. First thing, in Liberia, I think Dr. Campbell is the one who says seeds as a means of increasing their incomes. We're just creating more work for them. And in Liberia, we're now being more intentional about how we work with women in agriculture. For example, in my home, I have a food processor and a coffee mill that can pulverize food in seconds rather than having to beat it in a mortar for an hour. I have a machine to dry fruit and vegetables. I have a vacuum sealing machine that I can safely package and store food. I have solar panels and running water so I don't have to come from the farm with my heavy boosted yields and then go and haul water to try to manage and process that huge yield. Modern conveniences, of course. But there's no reason why rural women farmers can't improve their lives and livelihoods with conveniences such as that. In fact, our cocoa queens, as they call themselves, they're already fermenting and drying and producing fine flavor cocoa beans with these kinds of conveniences. They're already experimenting with innovations such as stainless steel tubs for fermenting rather than wood and other traditional methods. Our cereal producers are already using household-sized cassava graters and parching pans to ease the work of gari and fufu production. So the Ministry of Agriculture is looking to partner with UN Women and IFAD and other partners, shift our capacity support for women further along the value chain, not just at the planting stage, but all of the other things that make up a food system. How can we ease the burden of women and improve their livelihoods and their lives? We're looking to develop household and village level tools and equipment that will improve productivity and food production and reduce food waste. This is value addition that raises income, improves nutrition, and reduces food loss. And that is climate smart for us. Organic production is another strength, even if it's gained through long years of being unable to afford the yield-boosting chemicals. We have innovative companies like J-Palm, who's working on certified organic production, not just on the plantation, but of 30 communities who harvest wild palms that are growing organically in the forest. This not only adds value to the palm, but also fetches higher prices on export markets. We have LFPI, a new entrant, which is going to turn an old oil palm plantation into Africa's largest organic certified RSPO, Roundtable for Sustainable Palm Oil, for who don't know, certified palm plantation. Even while devoting more than half of its total production area for environmental and biodiversity conservation purposes. We can do this. And with almost 19% of our land mass, 1.8 million hectares, being considered degraded by the environmentalists, it's agricultural land by my definition and others, we have room to explore nature-based solutions for carbon sequestration, including agroforestry and tree crop production. And we have a long history in Liberia with tree crops for food and livelihoods. Reforestation that removes carbon from the atmosphere, mulching and other practices that enhance soil carbon, enhancing productivity in agro-food crops that grows on trees. These are climate smart solutions for us. Finally, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we can't afford for CSA to be anecdotal for us. Our lives depend on the kinds of transformation we can make happen in our agri-food systems. If climate, COVID, and conflict have taught us nothing, it's that we cannot remain perpetually vulnerable to shocks in global supply chains, no matter the cause. Self-sufficient is a must, but the kind of partnerships that this conference triggers between scientists, researchers, innovators, and those who will apply that research and those innovations, that's the way to go. We have to deploy and employ the best research now. We have to pilot the innovations. We have to try out the good ideas and keep looking to improve our triple bottom line of people, planet, and prosperity. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Honorable Minister. I think you will agree with me that Her Excellency speaks eloquently and passionately about agriculture. And she is a very true Pan-African, you know. For those of you who don't know, she's a champion of African agriculture sector here, and we are so blessed to have you. I think there's no way to better in today's morning session other than Her Excellency's speech. Once again, join me to thank Her Excellency and all the panelists today. I think she talked about drinking soup with fork. We're going to drink coffee. Please don't try that. So this brings us to the end of this morning's session. We're going to take a few minutes to take coffee. And then when we come back, some of you are asking, what is Dr. Bruce doing here? Dr. Bruce has a very mega project right after the coffee break, which is a presentation of a lead paper. And I welcome you to join him right after this. Enjoy your coffee break. Hello, the coffee break is going to be only 15 minutes and it's being taken at the pool side, and then we come back right here. which is going to be a lead paper on introspection, on CSSA action to strengthen accountability in Africa. Welcome.
Great. Thanks a lot. I am waiting for my presentation to come. It's really difficult to follow the minister from Liberia. Fantastic speech. But I guess I'll try. I'll be a little bit more down market. I didn't plan that. A little bit more critical about the progress and a little bit more pessimistic about progress. But now I need progress on my presentation, please. Great. Advancing climate smart agriculture in Africa, progress and outlook. I've changed the title slightly. Hit Africa. The second part is that there has been amazing progress, but, and there's some significant buts. And then mostly I'm going to focus on adaptation, because for Africa, adaptation is the critical piece, not so much mitigation. So within the climate smart agriculture domain, it's productivity and food security, it's adaptation, and it's mitigation. And I'm going to leave out the mitigation until one slide right at the end. Then the next point is about that there's not enough finance flowing into adaptation action. The next one is that there's private sector finance, which is a huge opportunity, which is not being captured. Great. And I've proved to myself that my memory is not failing. The sixth point is about policies and governance needing to improve. If there's anything in the technology sphere, I think it's irrigation and digitalization. And then the last piece is that we need really a vision of a differentiated rural community. Not all smallholders are the same. And then let's not forget mitigation. So climate impacts are severe and will increase. And if I told you all that stuff, you'd say you'd heard it before. So instead, I'm going to give you a more personal story. My longest period of my career is at the University of Zimbabwe in the 1980s and 90s. And this is a great study that's just come out from Zimbabwe, where they more or less say there's been a step change in the climate regime. This is temperature anomalies. Prior to 1980, post-1980, roughly 1 degree or more warmer on mean temperatures. It's in the same publication, a drying out of the country, a reduction in the length of the growing season. And then if you look into the IPCC for Southern Africa, a roughly 2 to 3 degree warmer world by 2100. And that's what we're on the course for at the moment. There's no indication that we're not on course for that. Rainfall to decrease by up to 20%, increases in drought, frequency and duration. Now 2100 is far away, or is it far away? My grandchild will experience that climate, but they'll probably be a climate refugee. There's a fantastic thing in Zimbabwe, agroecological zones, and the green is high productive area, the dark red is not productive, and they've recently revised that because the zones no longer apply. The natural region 4, which is the orange one, went from 40% to 29% to natural region 5, much more difficult place to farm. Natural region 5, which is already extremely difficult to farm, lost 8% of its land to a new region where they say cropping is not possible anymore. On that X is a place that I worked for many years in Chivi, And actually, there's many people in this audience, including my PhD student, so I have to be careful that I got the X in the right spot. But that X has changed from natural region 4 to natural region 5. When we were working there in the 1990s, we said that people would not get out of poverty in that region because of the extreme variability. We didn't actually mention climate change, bizarrely enough, because it wasn't in there, but the variability was so extreme, and now it's more extreme. So I challenge anybody to find a way out of poverty for those farmers who are far away from markets on small plots of land in this kind of region. So we have progress. This is the positive part. So in the 1990s, we didn't even mention climate change. In 2009, I took the job at the CGIAR of running the climate change program. And we had for the very first time, COP20, I can't remember which one, in 2009 in Copenhagen had an agriculture day. That was the first time agriculture was big on the agenda. Now, if you go to COP27 in Egypt, there are like 4 different food pavilions of 12 days each. So agriculture has really blossomed. So in other words, the narrative around climate change and agriculture being part of the solution and part of the problem is really there. And the program that I led, dissemination on climate smart agriculture has just gone out. 35,000 URLs, 10,000 unique domains, 150 countries are talking about climate smart agriculture. We estimate reaching 60 million people. 70 policy wins in the last 2 years in terms of getting climate in the policy processes, and informing 3.5 billion investment. So it's a match from my 2009 experience when agriculture was hardly in the climate change was hardly in the CGIAR to 12 years later has been fantastic. And we heard this morning, many countries have climate smart profiles. This is in Africa. 12 have climate smart investment plans. Multiple have climate smart agriculture in other forms of policy strategies. In the NDCs, climate smart agriculture is actually referenced explicitly a number of times. And we've seen major investments in climate smart agriculture. For example, the 250 million program in Kenya, which is very decentralized. But there are strong critiques about climate smart agriculture. Overlooking power, inequality, and access, overly focused on technical solutions, not caring or not focusing enough about who wins and who loses, undermining gender equity, uptake and adoption is challenging. But any of those things listed apply to almost any agricultural development stuff. So it's not really a critique of climate smart agriculture, it's a critique of broader agricultural development. I mentioned this already, I'm going to now focus just on adaptation and increase the critique. So current adaptation efforts are insufficient. And we've recently published the summary of the IPCC, which is 3,000 pages, into a 30-page document on what the IPCC says for food security. So a lot of my critical stuff, you can't blame me. I'm going to actually use peer-reviewed literature. But you can blame me for this thing not working. So this is what the IPCC says. Immediate, near-term climate risk reduction, it's coping, it's not transformational. Fragmented, small in scale, incremental, sector-specific. Slow implementation of national adaptation plans. These should be crucial for countries, and yet only 3 in Africa. 0 no evaluations of national adaptation plans. And then we see the statistics, 100 million people still being hit and needing humanitarian aid. IPCC says very clearly that SDG on zero hunger will not be met. We're not on track to achieve the Malabo targets. So the next piece is about the public finance. It's billions lower than the lowest cost estimates for near-term climate change. And what is coming in is more loans than grants, meaning that the debt burden increases. This is some numbers that you can get. These numbers are difficult to get. And as you can see, climate adaptation finance is really small. Development finance is much bigger. Debt payments, even more than both of them put together. That doesn't seem right to me. And of the funding committed, only half has been dispersed. So there's another issue, which is the capacity constraints in implementation. This is increasing the adaptation gap. Private finance is currently limited for adaptation, but represents a massive opportunity. So they estimate the food economy in Africa is going to be worth 1 trillion per annum by 2030. Now, I showed you this picture in the previous diagram. Now I'm going to put the food economy on the same diagram. It's a little bit, can't put them together, a bit chalk and cheese, but nonetheless, it just shows you if we can get markets and food systems working in Africa, there is much more finance for smallholder farmers if we get it right. In addition, there's this huge, frightening statistic, 230 million more mouths to feed in urban areas by 2030. But I think it's a mega opportunity. Demand is increasing, diets are changing as urbanization happens, there's going to be new food markets. Let's hope that it's not, the demand is not met through food imports, and that one can get local and national markets working. So really key for me for climate smart agriculture is business enabling environment needs to improve. Public finance should aim to leverage the private finance so that we can bring much more finance into the sector. There's never going to be enough public finance to deal with the adaptation needs. I think this is a great example, and one's always nervous about putting great examples because there's always negatives and positives, I'm sure. This is Africa in Foods in Rwanda. The public sector helped to de-risk and leverage. They built this amazing facility which does nutritious cereals. They very specifically directed their value chains to smallholder farmers, providing for the facility. And then you can work with the value chains in terms of building resilience, also being carbon friendly. They are hoping to expand this to 5 other countries. And it was nice that we saw in the video this morning, I think it was, about the agro-food initiative. For me, that is really crucial for climate smart agriculture. The IPCC, if there's anything that I took away from it, is that governance is a problem, and that the institutional environment is much more important than the technical solutions. And there's a huge list of things from the peer-reviewed literature: incoherent and fragmented systems, inadequate systems to manage climate finance, poor stakeholder participation, lack of community agency, gender inequalities, unaligned development and climate agendas, elite capture of climate governance systems, and so on and so on and so on. I just wanted to jump to the end. Unequal power relation between African countries and developed countries. I think that is really crucial. If you see the narratives that we implement on the African continent, there are so many coming from outside the continent. We really have to take the initiative and build the narrative locally. So now I'm going to go on to technologies, and in the audience we also have Portia Williams, who's done this great paper on adaptation strategies across all sectors. And what was really nice was many of the ones with the highest feasibility, moderate feasibility, came from the agricultural sector rather than from other sectors, and these were some of them. And you can go and look at the paper for the more details. I wanted to focus on 2 things, which is irrigation development and digitalization. And just, I should say that I really don't believe in silver bullets as well. So even when I'm talking about these things, it's very combined with institutional development, markets, policies. But water breakthrough. So globally, 20% of cropland is irrigated, only 5% in Africa. That seems seriously wrong in the face of climate change. And IMI has done some nice work. In the dry lands alone, they believe up to 100 million hectares can be sustainably irrigated. Now, irrigation is expensive, and we've had many failures. So you can only do it where there's value chains that can support it as well. Well, it's more likely to work. And they suggest that today we could add 14 million sustainably and profitably irrigated. So rather than thinking about these huge, large-scale ones, I think we have to think about small-scale and farmer-led, and there's lots of evidence that that can work. On the other side, in the energy sphere, solar power has dropped in cost enormously. And so we see these fantastic initiatives around solar irrigation, and the one that I'm most familiar with is the work in adaptation strategies, because you can now have multiple crops, including in dry seasons, and these different sorts of crops, so you can deal with nutrition issues as well. And then the other one is digitalization, and everybody has got different stories about this. This one comes from Senegal, with large numbers, dealing with local languages, personalized systems, working with the national Met services, and trying different ways of getting the message to people. And there are lots of positive things, but on a global scale, Africa is really in trouble in terms of digitalization. This is, the dark brown is highly vulnerable countries with low digital readiness. And you can see that we've got a long way to go to make it happen. So this is the last piece. We have to think about much more differentiated approach to adaptation in terms of commercial farmers, emergent farmers, mostly subsistent farmers, stepping out to urban jobs. We have to get people off the land, and urban and peri-urban agriculture. And the preliminary numbers that I have here are rather frightening, I think. These are numbers that somebody's come up with, whether it's right or wrong, I don't know. But 42 million farmers in the largely subsistence area is problematic. So the commercial farmers, they're also hit by climate, but essentially they should have the finances to deal with it. And one of the key ways forward is strong commodity groups with their own extension and research arms will be crucial for success. So not expecting government assistance. When I led the climate change program, I had to move to Denmark. And I've become super impressed by the Danish agricultural system. Arla is the 5th biggest dairy company in the world. It's owned by farmers. Segas Innovation is a private company, 500 employees, does all the extension. It has 85% of the fields in Denmark are covered with all these different things, the tillage regimes, the fertilizers, the pesticides used. And they provide apps for the farmers to manage it. But if they don't get jobs from the farmers, they're out. So in other words, the extension system is super efficient and meets the needs of the farmers. Perhaps it's a long way away, but I can see it happening already in some value chains. I think this group of farmers, 9 million, something like that, 9 million farms, are one of the key ones. And when we talk about poverty, agriculture driving poverty alleviation, I think it's this group that actually can do it. They can change the rural directories by increasing farm outputs, employment opportunities. But crucial for me would be that you get the environment, the policy environment and the incentive system working so that private sector funding comes in. So what one would see need is serious institutional reform, enhanced climate-informed advisories, insurance mechanisms, and the access to the needed inputs and information needed. In terms of one of those successes, I think Ethiopia is a good example, where They've really rethought their agricultural system, earmarked different places for different crops, and putting in the services necessary for them. So in the wheat value chain, clustering the actors, promoting linkages, easier service delivery, and then they've had a whole lot of successes in terms of that. And we heard some of somebody mentioned about Ethiopia wheat production earlier this morning, and it's building on that already. That's already happened in Ethiopia. The largely subsistent farmers, and this is where perhaps I'm going to irritate people. There's quite a lot of really good literature that smallholder farmers will not get out of poverty through agriculture because their land is too small, they don't have the right information, etc., etc. And for this group, social protection is crucial. And once again, agriculturists really need to work with other sectors. And it's public works programs, cash transfers, in-kind transfers, social insurance, and microinsurance. The ambition is to get some of those to become emergent farmers and others to step out of farming because you will remain climate vulnerable and you won't get out of poverty. But even with social insurance, social protection, this is results from Ethiopia again. I mean, they've enhanced livelihoods, they increased Ethiopia's GDP through stimulating production and consumption, and they've done a whole lot of environmental things in relation to food for work programs. So you can still do agricultural stuff, and in the hope in improving those kinds of things, you can also get some farmers into the next level. Remember, I said 230 million people, more mouths to feed in urban areas. I think that this is a mega opportunity in the next decade. And if we don't capture it, it will be a failed opportunity. We've recently done this with the new organization that I work with. And then the group that is stepping out of agriculture, I really think that a key adaptation strategy is to get out of rural areas. And if you speak to some farming families, what do they want for their children? They want them out as well. So I think this is a realistic thing, and we have to work to make it happen. This doesn't mean other sectors of the economy have to go. The IPC says that 10% of areas will go out of production that are currently producing in the next decades ahead because of climate change. So some areas will become much more difficult to farm. And we need various strategies for new skills. So this is my last slide. The ultimate strategy is to reduce emissions. And there the thing is, 1% emit 2 times more than the poorest 50% in the world. And so we need the US, Europe, China, India, Russia, Brazil to significantly reduce emissions if we're going to survive into the next decades. But it does mean that we must also think about our own agricultural system, that we must try and put it on a low emissions development pathway. So some key takeaway messages, just 4. I think we really have to think about tailoring adaptation pathways and thinking about women farmers, men farmers, rich farmers, poor farmers, and do different things with those. We have to greatly improve the enabling policy and institutional area. We have to much more embrace private sector approaches. And if there's anything in the technological sphere, I'm betting on irrigation and digitalization. And above all, we need action. Thank you.
Another round of applause to Dr. Bruce. I think he did bore us. I think Dr. Bruce has showed us that the challenges are real. We have seen that climate change crisis is here. You've seen the picture of Zimbabwe, the changing the rising temperatures, you've seen the changing rainfall patterns, you've seen the damning statistic that only 5% of cropland in Africa is irrigated, low levels of digitalization. But he also showed that there are opportunities, and those opportunities and innovations happening. You've seen the work of the African Improved Foods in Rwanda. You've seen the fact that, the food economy in Africa is going to be 1 trillion annually by 2030. That's a very big opportunity. But it's time to think for action, differentiated approach to address the challenges we have. So I'm going to take only 2 comments about this presentation or questions before we end the session. Are there comments? Introduce yourself, where you work, and then 1-minute question.
Thank you very much. My name is Gideon Obare from Kenya, Tegemeo Institute of Agricultural Policy and Development. 2 comments and questions possibly. From the previous presentation, what I had is greenhouse emission in Liberia, the whole country, is equivalent to green gas emission in developed countries per capita. And that Africa, or Liberia for that matter, is climate smart. Please comment with respect to what you have presented. Number 2, anecdotal evidence suggests that DRC Congo is able to feed the whole of the African continent. In fact, 8 million hectares are available for agricultural production. Only 20 million are being put into use in agricultural production. You are saying irrigation infrastructure in Africa is relatively low, and it is very expensive. So why should we focus on investment in irrigation infrastructure when we do have a whole amount of resources in DRC Congo where we can produce lots of food without investing in irrigation? In other words, we can produce rain-fed agriculture, which can be able to feed the whole of Africa and possibly export. Thank you very much. Can you comment on those 2?
Thank you. One more comment before, okay.
Chris Daudu from Ahmadu University in Nigeria. Very interesting presentation, if I may say so. I just want to look at 2 of your last takeaways, or some of your takeaways. Principally, 1, you created a lot of fear when you tried to say that agriculture may not be a route of an escape route for poverty for many of the smallholders of Nigeria. I mean, of Africa, including Nigeria. Can we modify that statement to say that primary production may not be? But if you look at the whole chain of agriculture, it is the last hope of Africa and Nigeria. But I don't know on what perspective you look at it from that from what perspective. Then the last one of your comments, which is enabling policies. The whole problem of African agriculture is lack of adequate policies. So, and you are still talking of policies for climate finance. I would love that from your breadth of experience, because it was a very beautiful presentation.
The real priority is adaptation. But going forward, we don't want to develop a food system that mimics Western Europe or North America, because that does contribute to greenhouse gas emissions. So we have to think of creative ways of reducing emissions going into the future. It's not a priority at the moment. The one was about the poverty alleviation. I don't know, in the area that we worked in Zimbabwe, in a very climate was like this, so farmers get hit by droughts every few years. And we worked for, I think, 5 years with quite a large amount of funding, trying different things with farmers. And we actually all said to each other at the start, if this doesn't work, we're going to get out of agriculture development. None of us, and at the end we agreed that we did not see a way out of poverty for that group, because they were too far from markets and they just didn't have the resources to stimulate agricultural production. And we were not brave enough to get out of agricultural development, unfortunately. I can still see my colleagues in the room here. So I think that for some parts in Africa, it's going to be extremely difficult to get out. But I agree with you that agriculture in other places can stimulate other jobs that are off-farm, for example. And so I agree on that. I think I'll skip the last question.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Bruce. That was amazing. I also want to thank each and everyone for being patient. I know it's been a long day, but I hope you enjoyed listening to all the speakers. Today, I think we spent much of the morning listening to the work that different countries like Ghana and Liberia are doing to advance agriculture, but also the work that FARA and other partners such as the European Union and the African Union are doing to advance agriculture across the African continent. And for the next 2 days, 2 to 3 days, we shall dig deeper into these issues that are facing agriculture, particularly looking at how we can use research and innovation to advance that sector in the continent. And so, ladies and gentlemen, once again, thank you for being patient. This brings us to the end of the opening plenary. And thank you for participation. You can feel free to give yourself another round of applause. So we're going for breakout sessions, and I'm going to call Professor Fatubi to give you, I know some of you have faced internet challenges here. The internet was very sluggish, so I'm going to call Professor Fatubi to give you where these sessions are going to take place. And I think it's going to be projected as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Can the IT group, okay. Wow, I'm struggling a bit to see it even clearly from here, but oh, please, can we give a big round of applause for the MC? Wow. And we're going to do it 2 more times. I think we need to give appreciation to our political leaders who spare time to come and give us all those motivating talks and presentation with facts and figures. A big one. Now, it's always very good to appreciate yourself. You've been very patient. You've listened attentively. And I think this morning is knowledge intensive. We will ensure that all the PowerPoint and the speeches, we put it in a repository so that we can pick it from time to time and learn from it. But for your patience and your contribution to African agriculture, a round of applause for yourself. Good. Now, we still have 2.5 days. And after this session, we'll bring it to a close shortly. 4 conferences are part of this big Science and Partnership Conference, and we are going to be departing into the different conference that brought us into this place. The lead for FNSSA group will be at Botiso. Okay, this is even not working. It's going to be at Botiso. Okay, the PANAP group, your conference will be at Asante Hall. And the knowledge management for agriculture development will be at Prince Hall. Now, the CSA Biennial Conference will be moving now into a presentation of scientific research papers, and there are 6 thematic areas. And so for theme 1, they'll be talking about the role of digitalization in advancing climate smart agriculture. We're going to be having that section at Britannia Hall. So once we get out, we go to Britannia Hall. For theme 2, the nexus of CSA and mechanization of the smallholder system in Africa is going to be at Volta Hall. Then the bottom-up and system-wide capacity development approaches to enhance CSA practices is going to be taking place at Afram Hall. Theme 4, strengthening the support of extension and advisory services to ensure climate smart compliance among smallholders in Africa, is going to take place at Urban Lounge. Then the 5th one is advances in CSA technology generation and use, and that is going to take place at Kaiser Hall. And the last one, theme 6, compatibility assessment of agroecology and CSA practices, is going to take place at the Ridge Arena. Where we are now is the Ridge Arena, and then we expect that a number of people will be here. That section is supported by the Desira Lift group. So this is the Ridge Arena. So if you have picked where your papers are, or where the papers you are interested in listening to or participating in, I mean, once you get out, there are ushers outside downstairs that can show you the direction. But all those breakout rooms, they are within this hotel, and you can quickly find your way there. Well, having said that, in the afternoon, after lunch, we'll be having the AXAF plenary. Now, let me say that the Leap for FNSSA, the PANAP, and the knowledge management conferences will continue till the end of the day. But for others, after the presentation of papers, we will come back to the Ridge Arena here for the AXAF plenary. I think we're going to be facing issues of acronyms, and it will be good to break down these acronyms from time to time. AXAF means African Climate Smart Agriculture Framework. That's a framework that FARA is developing with multiple stakeholders across and outside the continent to respond to the African Union Commission BRIC strategy on climate change, and FARA is looking at the agriculture component. So we're going to be coming back around 15:30 to 17 hours to this place to have that. I took time to do all this explanation because we want to be climate smart in our approach also, so we don't want to print too many papers. I mean, when you use too many papers, you're actually cutting down tree, and you're contributing to climate change, so you don't want to do that. So the program and the brochure is in electronic form. We have shared it widely with everyone, and there is an app for this conference which you can just download on your phone and portable devices, and it gives you clue and link to all this meeting. Well, having said that, I want to thank everyone again for this good participation and good conference. Yeah, one more thing. Tomorrow, there are going to be side events, a lot of side events, and the conferences will also continue. The Leap for FNSSA, the PANAP conference, and the Knowledge Management conference. So most of the side events will take place from 8:30 in the morning to around noon. From noon, there is opportunity for field visit for those who may be interested in field visit. And that is fully arranged. It is free of charge, FOC. But once you step down, if you are interested in going for the field visit, you need to quickly register for it downstairs. So ensure that if you want to go, register for it so that we can prepare appropriately to take you there and bring you back. On that note, the second, thank you. Oh, the lunch. Yeah. Thank you. That's why I have you here. You remind me. Yes, definitely there will be lunch today, and the ushers are waiting with the lunch coupon. So I mean, they will ensure that you get lunch coupon as you go out, and at the appropriate time we will go for the lunch. I mean, announcement about the lunch time will be made at our different conferences, and we are listening to the papers. Okay, before I get another information, let me quickly bring this to a close, and thank you very much for coming.
A last announcement before you leave. Farah has sponsored so many things, but it didn't sponsor headsets and translation kits. So please leave them where they are as you go out.
Please leave your headsets on the chairs. Thank you. Please don't forget to leave your headsets on the chairs. Kindly please leave your interpretation headset on the chair. Thank you.
The agroecology group, please, can you try to settle down if you are in here? Where's the gentleman? I need some people from Farah who will get us the online. The donations are 5 minutes, so that's it's very tight. It's very tight. You just have 3 minutes to introduce yourself and finish. Yeah. So, your name is? I'm Jerry. Yeah, here you are. And you are? By its producer. From Botswana. Okay, yeah. The agroecology group, can you please settle down? For those who will be following the agroecology session, please. Can all the presenters come to the front so that we can know who is in the room? We'll be having participants who will be joining us online.
The technical team had a chance to bring on board the online participants. There are a good number of people who are participating online and some of whom will be presenting. So just give the technical team a few minutes for them to connect the online participants. Yeah, in the interest of time, I'm just waiting for the technical team to give me a heads up as to whether they are ready. Once they are ready, we'll be ready to start. I'll be facilitating this session on behalf of the CADESA Executive Director, Dr. Cliff Damini, who is not here, but my name is Baitsi Podisi. I work for CADESA as the CADAP XP4 Program Coordinator. We have a big challenge ahead of us in terms of presentations. As you've seen, we are seriously behind time, and we'll have to restrict the time for presentation. We were advised that the Secretariat will announce when we could go for lunch. They have announced. That's how I'm sharing. Oh. Actually, they wanted people to go to their side, you guys, to go for lunch. Then we saw that the time
Mhm.
at the opera down here, and quickly after that, come and start the assignment.
Let's agree. What time do you think we can be back from lunch?
Now everybody's also going, where will they be? I don't know. So it's up to the section to pick.
Because we also have online participants, they need to be notified of the changes.
Then maybe you can quickly notify them, and then maybe you can go for lunch. You want to go for lunch?
If it were possible, take online participants, then lots of us presenting physical can come after.
Because it's also say people are waiting online. You can start, maybe, yeah, you can start.
You are going to start the online.
What is he saying about the online?
They said the online meetings room is not yet open.
Okay.
Well, how will you get information?
Sir? It's 10?